During a tennis match, the ball may hit the top of the net and within a few moments may fall to either side of the court. If lucky, it will fall on the opponent's half and the player wins. If unlucky, it will fall on the player's half and then the player loses. Chris Walton, a former famous tennis player, takes a job as an instructor at a country club. He has to teach beginners and practice strokes with skillful players. Chris rents a small apartment where in the evenings he reads Dostoevsky. One day he gets a new student, Tom Chute. He is from a wealthy family, his father has a large firm, and Tom himself is successful in life. After training, he and Chris go for a drink. In the course of the conversation, it turns out that both of them love opera, and Tom invites Chris to go to the opera with his family, his parents, and his sister. Chris agrees, and Tom's sister, Claude, takes an immediate liking to Chris. She spent more time watching him than what was happening on stage. After that evening, Tom calls Chris to invite him to his parents' country house. Tom says that Chloe would like to see Chris there. The country house has a tennis court, and Chris first played with Tom and then with Chloe. He and the girl then get to talking, and Chris tells her that he doesn't want to be an instructor for the rest of his life. He wants to accomplish something. They flirt, and then Chris goes home to change. That's where he meets Nola Rice, an actress and Tom's girlfriend. They are going to get married, but Tom's mother is against this passport. From the first moments, Chris realizes that he is attracted to Nola. Chris continues dating Chloe. They go to exhibitions and movies, and their relationship develops into a more intimate one. Flo then asks her father to find Chris a position at his firm. When he tells Chris about it, he is embarrassed, but does not mind working together with the girl. Chris and Chloe have dinner with Tom and Nola. During dinner, a spark runs between Chris and Nola. They realize that they are interested in each other and have a lot in common. Despite his cloudless life with Chloe, Chris is drawn to Nola and seeks to meet her. One day, he accidentally meets her on the street and takes her to an acting audition. Nola comes out of the audition upset, and the two of them go to a cafe for a drink. Nola flirts with Chris, and he reciprocates. Back at the country house, Chris learns to shoot. In Chloe's father's gun cabinet, there are several guns, which are used mainly for hunting and skeet shooting. It's raining outside the window, so the whole family gathers at home. Tom's mom harasses Nola with questions about the future, and the girl leaves in upset feelings. Chris sees this and follows her. They meet in the rain, kiss, and indulge in passion in a wheat field. Chris gets promoted at Chloe's father's firm and is sent to a business course to prepare for his new position. He and Chloe and her family still enjoy attending the opera as much as ever, but Chris notices that Nola is acting cold and distant with him. He asks her about it, and Nola replies that for her, everything between them was just a momentary weakness. Now she's going to marry Tom. Chris and Chloe have been dating for a while, and her parents start pestering her about getting married. Eventually, they get married in a church, and then buy a fancy apartment. Chloe's father helps. Playing tennis with Tom one day, Chris learns that he broke up with Nola, and he now has another girl, and they are serious. This news encouraged Chris, and he immediately called Nola. But her number was unavailable, so he went to her house, but she had already moved out. In bed with Chloe, Chris is not all smooth. The girl thinks that she is no longer interested in her husband, and he refers to the workload. Chloe wants a child, but so far they have nothing. Meanwhile, Tom gets married, and his wife is already expecting a child. Chloe and her friend go to the exhibition of a new artist, where Chris should come. But he is late for work. He gets sick, takes pills, remembers that he promised to meet his wife, and leaves for the art gallery. At the gallery, he meets Nola, follows her, and when she notices him, asks to see her. That's when Chloe and her friend show up, and Chris has to switch to whispering. He asks for Nola's phone number, and she, after a brief hesitation, gives it to him. After the gallery, Chris sends Chloe home and himself goes to Nola's to make love. They meet again and again. Chris loses his head with desire, while at home he behaves indifferently. When Chris and Chloe had dinner with Tom and his wife, they were approached by mutual acquaintances. The man was sure that he had seen Chris recently and even called him, but he pretended not to notice. Chris was on his way back from Nola's, so he said that his acquaintance was just mistaken. Nola becomes jealous. She does not want to be in the status of a mistress, so she asks Chris to leave Chloe. But the one admits that it is not so easy. He is already used to a certain lifestyle and comfort. Chris calms Nola by saying that he doesn't love Chloe anymore, and they only go to bed to conceive a child. True, when Chris, Chloe, and friends were about to fly to Greece, he gets a call from Nola. She has an urgent conversation with him. However, Chris asks to wait. He will talk to her when he returns to the city. Nola doesn't want to wait. She calls Heath's home phone and informs Chris that she is pregnant. When Chris arrives at Nola's house, they fight. Nola doesn't want an abortion. She wants to have the baby and raise it with Chris. In the end, Chris promises to leave Chloe, except that he can't talk to his wife. At the crucial moment, he chickens out. Chloe gives him a chance to explain himself, asks him directly if he has an affair on the side, but Chris denies it. When he meets Nola, he promises to tell Chloe everything after a trip to Greece. However, they do not go to Greece because one of their friends had to go to the hospital. At the same time, Chris continues to lie to Nola that he is now absent. The girl regularly calls him to find out how things are going. While walking around town, Nola sees Chris leaving a store and getting into a car. She calls him and asks him where he is. Chris replies that he is in Greece. Afterward, Nola meets Chris from work and has a scandal. Chris has to forcefully shove her into a cab and drive her home. There he finds the right words, twists his way out of it, and Nola believes him again. She insists that Chris tell Chloe everything. If he doesn't, she'll tell him herself. Chris doesn't want to lose his cozy and secure life. He realizes that nothing good awaits him with Nola, that she was just a girl on the side. He thinks for a long time about what should be done. Having made a decision, Chris goes to Alex's gun room, takes there a shotgun and ammunition, and hides them in his tennis bag. To provide himself with an alibi, Chris buys tickets to a musical and invites Chloe to it, but they go separately. That day, Chris asks Nola to come home early, saying he has good news for her. Chris then goes to Nola's house, knocks on her neighbor's door, whom he met a little earlier, and goes inside. Ostensibly, he needs to see how her TV is doing. While the woman went to get a drink of medicine, Chris got and assembled a shotgun, loaded it, and then went into another room and killed the woman. He then staged a robbery, removed the wedding ring from the deceased woman's hand where her name was engraved, and waited for Nola. When the girl entered the entryway, he called out to her and killed her with a shot to the chest. He then put the gun in his bag and fled. Chris was shaking as he drove to meet Chloe, but when he saw her, he calmed down. The police decided that the woman was shot by a drug addict and Nola was a bystander, so they killed her too. Chloe's family learned of the murder from the newspapers. Chris pretended to be stunned by what had happened. Once at the country house, Chris put the shotgun and the remaining ammunition back in its place and shoved the loot into his pockets to get rid of the old woman's belongings later. As Chris and Chloe were informing the girl's parents that their daughter was pregnant, Chris received a call from the detective investigating Nola's murder. He wants to meet. Going to meet the detective, Chris throws the murdered woman's belongings into the river, but her wedding ring hits the fence like a tennis ball sometimes hits the top of the net, freezes for a second, and falls to the sidewalk. Chris doesn't see it. He hurries to the detective's office. At the police, it turns out that Nola kept a diary where she described everything that happens between her and Chris. Because of this, he's come under suspicion. But Chris says that it was just an affair and he has no motive to kill Nola. He is released, but promises to investigate further. Chris is working late. He thinks he hears some noise in the apartment. He drops his wine glass and then goes to get napkins to wipe the drink off the table. That's when Nola and the woman he killed show up and accuse him, and Chris tries to justify himself. That same night, the detective who investigated Nola's murder has a dream. He realized that Chris had committed the double murder. When he arrives at the police station, the detective shares his theory with his partner. But the latter says that the killer has already been found. The police were informed of the murder, and when they went to the scene, they found a dead drug addict with the murdered woman's wedding ring in his belongings. They recognized it from the engraving. The detective assumed that Chris had simply thrown the ring away and the junkie had found it, but quickly abandoned that idea. Chloe, meanwhile, gave birth. The whole family is happy, and Chloe already wants a second child. This is the end of the movie. Thank you for watching. Subscribe and give it a like if it was interesting.